Sorry, I'm a little bit hobbled. I've had a fall. That's all right. So did we all. But our bright minds will get us back out of it again. Agnotology. In other words, being ignorant is not so much an art as it is a science. And in this day, what we don't know really is killing us. Now, if I'm a rationalist, and I am, I can see the sun move across the sky. I can be B-O-B, because I cannot feel myself hurling through space. So, I see the sun going across the sky, and I find a story that will match it, that will make sense of it. And I will find other information that feeds into that, and thus the flat earth sciences are born. The earth must be a flat space, place, disk, because there's a curved horizon. I can start building on that. And I can keep that up because, as she noted, pictures are flat. I can only see directly what's in front of me. I cannot see behind you. So I can keep my sense of truth. And I can refute any of you who are going to insist to me that the earth is not round, I got the disk part, but that it's a sphere. But I can only do that up to a point. And that's where other common senses and more individuals' experiences start to kick in, such as flights in airplanes, trips to the moon, international space stations. And then a tipping point is reached, and it becomes common sense to see the world as a sphere, to see the world as round, even though I have not personally experienced that. And I don't know if any of you actually have. Anybody here been in the space station? No astronauts? It's Florida. We have astronauts. It's a legitimate question. It's a legitimate question. But what we have, and this is the important part, is we know it's round and a sphere because we trust the people who have experienced it. We trust those who have experienced the earth as a sphere. And for most of us in this room, those people were our parents, the television set as children, and our earliest educators. Truth is a tricky thing, and trust is even trickier. And our ever-evolving brains, they're always a little bit behind the curve. We're always like, oh, should I eat the poison berry or not? You know, we're always trying to make sense of this world. And sometimes it turns out the smarter you are, the more challenged you are by truths that go against your experience. I had a wonderful roommate a long time ago, a teacher named Bob Parmakian. And the lesson of that week was going to be telling time on a clock. You know, it was all about time. It was about there are 60 seconds in a minute. There are 60 minutes in an hour, and class gets out at 2:40. Lunchtime is at 11:30, right? It was a wonderful class. And so he's going on in his lesson, and this little hand goes, you're wrong! And Bob, being the brilliant teacher that he was, went, I am? Yes, and I can prove it. Okay. Well, I can't prove it today, but I can prove it tomorrow. Okay. And so he ended his lesson and waited till the next day. And as he watched all the kids file out and get into the bus, he noticed that that child was stopping everyone who had a digital watch on, because these are in the days before every second grader had a cell phone. And he's looking at the digital watch, and he's watching this, and they all go on the bus, and they go. So the next day, the kid comes in, and he's got a digital electric alarm clock. And he goes over, and he plugs it into the wall. He says, wait, you just wait. Like, okay, we'll wait. See, 59-0. There are 59 minutes in an hour. And the rest of the class, those that had digital wristwatches kind of raised their hands in this kind of like second grade power salute. Because they loved being right against the teacher. And Bob went, And to his credit, he had them clear the classroom and make an analog clock. And as those kids moved from one spot, to the next spot, they experienced the space, and they did it all the way till lunch. And at the end of class, not only did those kids know how to tell time, he went to the kid who brought the clock and he said, "Thank you." He said, "Thank you." Why? Because that child had a bright, inquiring mind, and although their deduction was wrong, it was understandable based on observation. And that, my friends, is science. We are a nation that's been raised to believe common sense to be some kind of sacred cow. We look at it, no one is immune. We had the little post where everybody's in the classroom, I don't know how many of you saw it, that was put up for my talk. And everybody's sitting in the classroom is empty. And I believe it's on like climate or something. And everybody's outside standing in the rain, right? And it's like, well, it's common sense to come inside. And I had someone post from California on my feed that said, "Oh my gosh, if it was raining, I would be outside too." Because they're experiencing a drought. Common sense is individual specific and not at all common. No one is immune to this. Not liberals, not conservatives, not bankers, not artists. What we have trouble with is how we ask questions. How we learn to see beyond our own experiences. And in these canyons, that's where the science of agnotology lives. Agnotology is, to quote a paper on combating climate change misinformation by John Cook, who's one of the leaders. He's the, I don't know if it's the president or the major chair of the Global Change Initiative, which is looking at why and how do we shift the mindset around the idea that there's a climate crisis. But he says, agnotology is the study of how and why ignorance or misconceptions exist. Misconceptions are a challenge for educators, being extremely difficult to remove, and this is the really important part, interfering with the processing of new knowledge. This was first brought to light, as was mentioned by Robert Proctor, who is credited with coining the word, although, people that love to fight about who created a word are going to squabble about that one. But what he did was he really utilized it in his study of the tobacco wars in a brilliant and awful book called The Golden Holocaust, which outlines in detail how and why. And I have two fathers who died of cancer. And this huge tome of a book makes very clear the processes by which we are blinded to truths and how we are hobbled upon acting on them. I mean, how on earth is tobacco even legal? And I say that, and there's people that smoke in this room, because I know you do. And you're like, well, consider if poppies had been a cash crop here. If the opium poppy had been a cash crop instead of tobacco, we would be having a very different conversation. My father-in-law is a smoker, has been for 70 years. If cigarettes cause cancer, he would be dead, right? I lost two fathers to cancer, both smokers. Cigarettes clearly kill, right? Wrong. Actually, both of those statements is inaccurate. And yet, it is true that tobacco is an addictive and lethal substance. Nicotine is one of the most lethal substances we have on the planet. Agnotology is fed by clear psychological principles and a couple of biological tendencies. One, I'm going to list them. It's going to be like a little class for a bit, but that's okay. We'll get back to the sermon. Okay, 1, confirmation bias. 2, bias blind spot. 3, priming and memory linkage. 4, false consensus. And 5, which becomes the Holy Trinity, doubt, insecurity, and the fear of being wrong. These are used to great and grave advantage by those who know how. First and foremost is confirmation bias. We see and hear what we expect to see and hear. And as we gather more information that matches our expectations in our brains wire those together. They create neurological pathways to speed those connections up. So we see and believe what we hear faster and faster. So we get more and more evidence that bucks up the idea that this is truth. The earth is flat. Our bias blind spot. This is the hard one because this is where you're unaware. Even when we become aware, if we don't actively practice mindfulness, and if we're not practicing our awareness of our own personal and cultural blinders, it's really difficult. And it's hard. It's why every white person in this room, everyone in this room, has a difficult time seeing racism. It's why every man in this room cannot understand sexism. And it's even why the women in this room cannot often interpret sexist language when it's right in front of their face. Next comes priming. Priming is like a pump. You lay down the foundation for the future that we're going to build on. It's why we learn words before we learn sentences. We're built this way. We're built this way for practical, evolutionary reasons. It's more efficient, or at least that's what science tells us so far. Priming and memory linkage. If I simply show you a flashcard with a soft gray kitten, and another flashcard with the word fog on it, and then I repeat that, even just by hearing it, this still works. Soft gray kitten, fog. Soft gray kitten, fog. Soft gray kitten, fog. Does any of you have a picture in your mind already? Anybody? Right? And some of you will have a picture of a poem. And some of you don't have that picture, and that's okay if I just keep going, soft gray kitten, fog, soft gray kitten, fog, fog, soft gray kitten, fog, soft gray kitten. Your brains are automatically now linking these two words. It's what we do. It's efficient. So now, for a little bit, because we haven't done much of it, the word fog is going to trigger in your mind soft gray kitten, and soft gray kitten is going to trigger in your mind fog. Now with this information, I can take a political person who's running for an office, a candidate. I can take their picture and say the word criminal. And I can say, this person, criminal. This person, criminal. Criminal, this person, criminal. And I can repeat this over and over again, and your brain links these up. And how many of you have a picture in your mind right now? And that picture's of John Adams, right? Seriously. Thomas Jefferson hired someone specifically to go after and label John Adams a criminal. However, most people couldn't afford paper. We didn't have the internet. We couldn't get the speed of these connections fast enough, which allowed for other pictures that said, John Adams is not a criminal, to go ahead, and the message can't be as connected. Once we have given the words meaning, a different picture develops. But rather than keep on going on this psychological stuff, I want to read you a poem. Spoon River Anthology by Edgar Lee Masters. We're really in the classroom today. That's okay. Anna Clute. Over and over they used to ask me, while buying the wine or the beer, in Peoria, later in Chicago, Denver, Frisco, New York, wherever I lived, how I happened to lead the life. What was the start of it? I tell them, the silk dress and the promise of marriage from a rich man was Lucius Atherton. But that was not really it at all. Suppose a boy steals an apple from the tray at the grocery store, and they all begin to call him a thief. The editor, the minister, the judge, all the people. A thief, a thief, a thief. Wherever he goes, he can't get work, and he can't get bread without stealing it. Well, why, the boy will steal. It's the way the people regard the theft of the apple. That makes the boy what he is. Not only does everyone believe that the child is the thief, the child internalizes it, and not only becomes a thief, sees himself as a thief. Thus, a girl in middle school who is labeled a slut has to reclaim a label rather than deny it because it's been internalized. The free love of the 1960s failed to overturn the patriarchy, and until we think it's okay to tackle everyone who is wearing a football jersey, because clearly they're dressed for it, right? We are in the odd position of defending push-up bras and other clothing that objectifies women as empowering, while failing to notice that padded codpieces have never made a fashion comeback. In fact, the chaining is so successful that our prison system is filled with young black men arrested and convicted of drug crimes in huge disproportion to the rates of actual drug usage and drug crimes, which are overwhelmingly white. Why? The face of the war on drugs was a young, urban, black male. So successful has this been that most are unaware of it, as shown by a particularly telling confirmation bias study done at Harvard. Want more about this? Read The New Jim Crow. I urge everyone in this room to read this book. Then there is false consensus. It is where many disparate studies are kind of put together to make it look like everybody agrees. You know, probably a famous one. It's like 4 out of 5 doctors recommend X. Well, they may be recommending X because 80% of the doctors in that area got boatloads of free samples of product X. And really what they're recommending is the compound, not the brand name. But because they've passed it out, they have then endorsed it. Therefore, that statement is legal. And those doctors may be recommending compound X because of their education and biases that have literally prevented them from looking at compounds B, Y, and Z. And then finally, we have doubt, insecurity, and the fear of being wrong, or the fear of admitting that we've been conned. See, you see 2 scientists speaking, right? 2 scientists speaking, they're presenting an argument. They both look very good, right? And they're in opposition. And your brain starts to give them equal weight. One scientist, however, may be speaking representing 98% of all published papers. The other is speaking only representing 2% of published papers. But because you only see 2 in front of you, your brain automatically gives them equal weight. And then our natural other biases start, those unintended ones, those hidden ones that we can't remember because we're the fish that swims in the water, start playing in. So we start looking at them. And for example, in science, we prefer mid-Atlantic accents over southern ones. We prefer Eastern European accents over Spanish ones. We prefer lab coats over suit coats. And we prefer men over women. So if I want to get information out, what do? I put a mid-Atlantic speaking or an Eastern European speaking man in a lab coat to be the person that is next to the kind of frazzled only person available that got it at the last minutes because she's so knee-deep trying to get all of her grants out so she can keep doing her research because her funding keeps getting cut. Who do I believe based on my natural biases? Who do I think is truthier? Then I'm going to insert some controversy. Remember, my father father-in-law is still alive at 87 years old and still smoking. How can smoking kill? And then if I use really big words, agnotology, exegesis, if I learn really big words in between little words that make you feel good, like freedom, America, God, ones that hit your heart and your culture, ones that specifically appeal to you, like calling on the women on the room or the men in the room, by calling on the students or the teachers in the room. If I start doing that, I am going along highways that have already been built. This is the field of agnotology, or as John Burgard, he was the marketing director of a company, Brown and William. Anybody know Brown and William?
Sure.
Yeah. Big tobacco, Lucky Strikes. My father, the smoker, helped design that first logo. Great. What a hideous legacy, right on target. What John Burgard said was, doubt is our product. They already knew that they couldn't refute any of the studies, as you heard earlier. But here's the bottom line. The bottom line to all of this is you and me. We want to feel okay. We want to feel safe. We don't want to feel like we're sinners. We don't want to feel that we're wrong. And we don't want to feel like we've been conned. And what's happened is now, sadly, people distrust science. And the trouble with that is you can never trust science. Ever. Nor should you. To put it in terms like trust and belief is to totally miss the truth of science. Science is a system of continuous inquiry, each answer provoking more questions. It's based on curiosity. I wonder. Observation. I see, hear, smell, taste, think. Hypothesis. Maybe. Experimentation. Let's move all the chairs in the classroom. Let's see what happens. Evaluation. What did that mean? What did that say? Reconfiguration and back again to curiosity. That curiosity that says, what is true? Is that really true? How is that true? When is that true? Where is that true? With whom is that true? And from there, we develop mutual experiences from which we ask more questions. But if we become primed to think of science as fact and as truth, if we start confusing it with faith and belief, then we can be manipulated rather easily by our own personal biases, our experiences, our fine minds, and those that want to create battles of us versus them. We have individuals and institutions sowing seeds of doubt into that most fertile of soils, our minds. Doubt is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's where you get the I wonder that leads to deeper inquiry. But when it's matched with insecurity, when it's matched with the fear of being wrong, when it's matched why I can't be a sinner, when it's matched with I don't want to feel conned, it causes polarization, and that's deadly. Ignorance may simply be not knowing, but agnotology is the study of intentional ignorance, and its use in the world is damaging. It's dangerous. If we do not begin to understand how the world works, we are putting our whole world in peril. Agnogenesis, that's another one of those big words. Agnogenesis is the intentional misleading of knowledge, the misdirection of facts, and the sowing of seeds of doubt that are inconvenient, detrimental, or contrary to the interests of the individual, the campaign, the special interest group, or the industry. And it's a frighteningly effective tool. And one of the most horrifying things about it is its victims then become its perpetrators, often without even noticing it. We've been so focused on we've been so focused on learning about knowledge, epistemology. We have huge, you can Google it and you're going to get really sort of interesting things. You're going to get the epistemology of philosophies a lot. You're going to get the epistemology of sciences a lot, of education a lot. You will even pull up the epistemology of the closet. That is the knowledge that we have about closets and how that philosophy affects who we are. You pull up agnotology and you get pretty much two. You get John Proctor, who coined the word, and you get the tobacco studies, and now some climate change stuff. That's it. Whereas every single campaign, every boardroom of a major corporation has people who know about this field in it. We have to stop and be aware of this. We love to study knowledge. It makes us feel smart. But we really don't want to delve into ignorance. We really don't. We'd rather have us versus them. We'd rather have these squabbles than actually look in the mirror or really try to understand why we, or they, believe such and such, whatever the such and such is, despite all evidence to the contrary. And we'll end up in unequal battles. You've all been in them. Science versus dogma. Yeah, it's a common one. We all fall into it. Right? And we end up saying by things like, well, we have to stop comparing apples and oranges. And then some bright person in our crowd will go, they're both fruit. You know, but we have to go beside that because belief lives in a different part of ourselves than do facts. And both are important. And both are fully impacted by our culture, our experiences, and neither are as objective as we wish they would be. So we have to be aware of our biases, or at least aware of the fact that we have them, even if we can't be aware of them. Because knowing that we cannot avoid priming, we can't avoid it. We can't avoid memory linkage. It's how we're built. It's a good thing. It's why I know most of your names, but not all of your names. But I know your names in this room. Memory linkage is important, but we can be aware that we can add more pictures. Remember how John Adams' campaign failed. We can add more pictures and more experiences. We can be aware of false consensus. We can check ourselves for the weed seeds of doubt and insecurity. We can be more comfortable with the idea that we've been conned. And with insecurity, we can find real security in that we are loved. We belong and we're here. We can risk being wrong. We can risk changing our minds when we discover new information. And we can take a breath. We can get quiet. And in stillness, find a way to trust love. We must find our way back to simple, sacred inquiry, where both science and religion found its origins, where we ask, is that true? Is that really true? How do I know it's true? Is it true for me? Is it true for you? Is it true here? Is it true now? And then is it needed? Is it needed in this moment? Is it necessary? Is it urgent? How useful is it? And to whom is it useful? And above all, is it kind? Oriah Mountain Dreamer wrote last night in her blog, kindness is never wrong. And I loved that, because it isn't. Even if you've miscalculated, even if your facts aren't right, whatever it is, if you look at that picture, kindness is never wrong. So ask yourself, is it kind? To whom is it kind? How is it kind? We may not be able to see the air we breathe, just as fish, they don't know their water. But we can be mindful of those that wish to manipulate us for their goals. And we have to decide what our really big goals are, because they're what we have to hold everything up to for comparison. Equity, justice, compassion, respect for the inherent worth and dignity of all beings, heaven on earth. Those are my goals. We have to be able to see the weeds to weed the garden if we want the fruit from the trees of life to thrive. Thank you. I'll be out there gardening.